Welcome back to another Lakescape podcast. I am Daniel Jackson. I have Dave Gray with me today. He's the general manager on the marine construction side of Lakescape. Dave, today I want to talk about boat lifts and specifically cable lifts. I know in your career you've installed probably hundreds of lifts, probably serviced thousands of lifts. I think it'd be safe to say that a lot of what we service is kind of outdated technology, more the plate drive, kind of exposed systems, lifts. Talk a little bit about, we'll kind of go into the history of boat lifts and what you've seen, kind of the older technology, and then, we can kind of talk about some of the features of the newer lifts as well.
On the plate drives, I grew up and that's all we had to use. They do the job fine and so forth. It's just a lot of maintenance involved with it. You've got, you've got that small worm gear on it that requires a tremendous amount of grease and so forth. But, and then of course the belt drive, all of which works fine. A lot of it depends on who installs it as far as the, how smooth it operates. But that's one of our biggest items that we service. That we get requests in for is like belt slipping and so forth. And the problem with the belts is and most people don't realize this, there's a certain belt that you put on there that you can't buy locally. You can't go down to the auto parts store and buy it, and that happens a lot of times on weekends when the homeowner gets up there and his family's standing there trying to get on the boat. He can't get it down. They run the auto parts store, and they get a belt that is the right size, but it's not. It's a fiber belt. It's a smooth belt rather than like a rubber cog belt, and it just doesn't grip as good. It's made for a car application rather than a boat lift. So that's one of the biggest things we see when we go out to service it and find out that the belt's slipping is that it's actually not the right belt.
When you say, belts would probably have a somewhat short lifespan too. You have to replace those frequently.
It's just like a tire on a car, it's made out of rubber, and over time, just like a car tire, it gets hard, so it doesn't grip as good. And then when that belt starts slipping, the pulley on the gear plate itself will actually burn a little flat spot in it, and so that we see that quite a bit.
I know on a lot of the older lifts too, you don't see grooved winders
right
on the drive pipe. That makes a big difference too, keeping the cable nice and neat. That's probably one of the main calls we get while our service team is going out and fixing cables at a bird nest because they're not wrapping the way they should, not tracking correctly.
Well, and even more so than that, the problem with not having the cable winder is it lets the cable rub on itself, and it creates those burrs. And if you pay attention on the older style lifts that have the gear plates and don't have the winders, you'll see little metal shavings in the boat if you really pay attention. And that's from that wire rubbing on each other, and you'll hear it kind of crinkling and popping. I think anybody that's got that type of lift, and it's not that the lift doesn't work, it just requires a lot of maintenance, and it shortens the life of the cables. You get a lift that's got a cable winder on it, most manufacturers recommend you replace the cables once every few years. I've seen people that have never replaced their cables as long as they have winders and they operate the lift properly.
Yeah, then I've seen lifts that we had to go out every year. We didn't install the lift; it was installed incorrectly. We made some adjustments to it, and then it's still just having issues year after year. And those little burrs you're talking about, they'll stick you pretty good. I don't recommend grabbing a cable. I'll do it because I was inspecting a lift and looking at it, but think about that too. If you don't have those covered up, someone grabs those, you'll get stuck pretty good with that little burrs coming out, and that can lead to bigger problems with that's the starting point of getting that cable to come.
The problem is the safety issue is a huge thing because obviously you want your lift to be dependable. You get all the family lined up on the pier, and the worst thing that can happen is, can't get the boat down or up or whichever direction you're going. But with the cables on that winder, the safety factor is huge because the last thing you want is not only not being able to use the boat, But if one of the cables breaks with everybody standing next to it, that boat's going to shift whichever direction it's going. And most of the time, if you have one cable break, it'll break more than one just because it puts too much pressure on the remaining three. And usually you'll have a two cable break because it shifts and it'll let the boat fall to either front, back, or to the side. So that always worries me, as far as when I see the older style lifts.
Yeah. So we kind of went down the list on, older lifts, the good and the bad. And what would you say makes a good lift? We're a high tide dealer. We believe in their product and what they put together as a package. They've been doing it, I think, for over 45 years. They developed some technology that other companies have, produced as well, as far as gear drive technology, where, the older plate drives, you have all the components exposed. You got grease dripping, and you got bird nests building in there. And then they developed their gear drive, which comes now in a little 10-inch by 10-inch box, and we call it bulletproof because it essentially is. You'll never have to do any kind of maintenance to that part of the lift system. And then, but what, in your opinion, so, going down the list of all the features of High Tide, what makes them different than the other lifts and makes their lift great?
I would say the gear drive is definitely one of the biggest factors, because basically it's an oil bath system. Mm-hmm. And other than you get one occasionally, I've seen maybe one or two in 5 years that develop like a leak around the seal or something, but nothing major. There's no maintenance at all, to it. It just, like you said, it's bulletproof. It just keeps running. The boat lift doesn't make enough revolutions to ever require that oil to be changed that I have seen. Mm-hmm. You just hardly can't use it that much. Yep. It's very similar to like say a bush hog on the back of a tractor. I've never changed my fluid, and that bush hog runs 2,600 RPM for hours and hours. Mm-hmm. So with that said, I can't imagine you ever running the gear drive by needing to change the oil. So but you have the gearbox, you have the winders that keep the cables from wearing.
Yeah, I think that's key.
Oh yeah. And the gearbox is nice from a standpoint of a plate drive. By the nature of it, is super slow. Mm-hmm. The slowest gearbox I've ever seen is still faster than a plate drive.
Oh yeah.
And that's going to make a big difference for when the waves are rolling in and you're trying to get the lift up before you catch like a wakeboard boat wave or a big pontoon wave coming through. You need to get that thing up reasonably as quick as you can. Wind's blowing. If it's like my family, you get everybody trying to get on and off. You don't want anybody getting hurt while the boat's sloshing around. So, so that's two of the biggest things. It's just the gear drive, the dependable nature of it, as well as the winders, keeping the cables correctly. We don't, on a cable winder, we don't ever see cables with a problem unless it's a user-caused issue where they let the boat down too far and it touches the ground or something like that. We just don't ever see any issues.
That's a huge advantage over all the other lifts out there that don't have a groove winder. If you look closely at that winder, you can see that there is a small gap in between each of those cables. They never touch, and they nestle neatly in those grooves. Some other features of High Tide I know is everything we sell now is all aluminum.
Right.
You got stainless steel cable, where I think for the last 25 years we probably haven't sold a lift that has anything but stainless steel cable on it. It'd be crazy to use galvanized cable anymore. And the amount of lifts that we've seen, or boats that have fallen on lifts with galvanized cable, is a little bit mind-boggling that people would even want to use that.
Well, the problem while you're on the galvanized cable thought is that cable rusts from the inside out, and you can't always see it. And the problem is, it's not that people necessarily leave them in the water, but you do raise and lower it, so that part of that cable that gets wet every time you launch the boat, it will definitely rust from the inside out, and so you don't always have warning on when it's going to pop, and that's the dangerous part. The stainless cable by far is the only way to go. It takes the same amount of labor to install a galvanized or stainless cable, so why not spend a few extra dollars on the stainless cable and not have to worry about it. So
one of the other features on High Tide, we always sell it with a wireless remote. So they have a Piranha remote, and we also have the Premier remote as well, which has an app that works with it. But all of these, kind of listing out features, but all the benefits of this is just ease of use and and less maintenance over the life of the lift, and you can come down and enjoy your lake property and not have to worry about fixing stuff every time you come here. And I mean that's why we always sell the best of the best products. We want to put our name on something that's gonna serve you well over the life of the product itself, and not putting something out there just to send crews out to maintain it for you.
Well, and the wireless remote, I mean, that's key, especially on Lake Martin where the water fluctuates, because the last thing you want to do is the water will be down 2 feet, you pull in, you have to crawl up on top of the pier to run the manual switch, and it's just not a safe situation at all. And we don't encourage people to ride the lifts up and down or anything like that.
Sure.
But you can definitely pull in, use your remote to stabilize the boat to where you can get off of it safely.
Yeah.
Without it sloshing around. But and again, I wouldn't ride the lift up and down, but you can definitely stabilize it.
Yep.
And then that makes it a safe situation.
Sure. My experience with them is going out and looking at properties where people have just purchased a new property and they notice a High Tide lift there. And they're like, well, the owner said they didn't use it, last few years. And I go out and run it. Yeah, it needs a little bit of grease, but I mean, it's operating fine. They really are bulletproof. So, well, that kind of wraps it up today. I hope that's been helpful understanding more about boat lifts in general, and specifically the High Tide product that we sell here at Lakescape. If you want to, look at getting a new boat lift, or if you have an existing lift you need to get serviced, you can give us a call at 334-857-2443, or you can visit us online at lakescape.com, or just stop by and visit us at our shop. And we'd be happy to help you out. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.